Whipple, Executive Director of the Old State House.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody who's here today. We're gathered here to commemorate the meeting of Generals Rochambeau and Washington in September 1780. They met on these very grounds. I say the grounds because this old State House wasn't here yet. Its wooden predecessor stood in this yard at that time. A few years later, that wooden State House would be damaged by fire caused by Hartford's post-revolutionary celebrations, which involved candles and fireworks. But in September 1780, that building still stood, and on these grounds and elsewhere, no one could imagine that the Americans would have victory over the British Army. General Washington and his men were in New York that September, struggling to stay afloat in what appeared to be an unwinnable war. General Rochambeau was with his men stationed in Newport, wondering how their role in this conflict might develop. Washington and Rochambeau at that point had corresponded, but not met. That September, they agreed to meet here in Hartford on this spot, halfway between New York and Newport. Washington came from the west with his men and a sliver of hope that France would help win the war. Rochambeau came from the east with his men and several doubts about the Americans' ability to win the war, even with French support. But during this meeting, the two generals formed a bond. They came to trust one another, and that trust developed into plans to win the war. A year after the meeting here in Hartford, they met in Wethersfield, where they formed plans that led to victory. This building and these grounds hold many stories. The story we commemorate today is just one of the important Connecticut national and international stories that live here. We are pleased and proud to commemorate it with you and the First Company Governor's Foot Guard. We're so happy to have you here to commemorate this important event. Thank you for being here.
I am pleased to introduce Christine Pitsley, Special Projects Director of the Connecticut State Library.
Good afternoon. I am honored to be here today and to talk for just a minute about the importance of the Franco-Connecticut relationship that has spanned almost 250 years. A friendship that began in the American Revolution, the arrival of Jean-Baptiste d'Antienne de Vimeur, Comte de Rochambeau, and the French army he commanded strengthened it. Like the bonds formed with Seicheprey during the First World War, the history of our Franco-Connecticut relationships has been mostly forgotten, but both are memorialized by a small few. Like the First Company Governor's Foot Guard, whose commemoration of this day is part of their history and their being. History tends to remember the bold and adventurous figures like the Marquis de Lafayette because they easily capture the imagination of writers and readers alike. Men like Rochambeau, who are brilliant military tacticians, do not always fit the stereotype of the hero, but often it is those in the background or those without outward displays of romance, power, or prestige who have compelling and important stories and can connect us to history in ways that can engage even those among us who profess to hate history. It is with that in mind that the Connecticut State Library has committed to telling the story of not just the Comte de Rochambeau and his generals, but also, as far as we are able, to the stories of the soldiers who accompanied him, as well as some of the lesser-known French figures who played a part in the American Revolution, like Louis-Dominique Etie de Cornay. Cornay was the Commissioner of War who, in 1780, accompanied the Marquis de Lafayette on his voyage to America and was responsible for provisioning the troops ahead of Rochambeau's arrival. Thus, it was only natural that he would work closely with Jonathan Trumbull here in Connecticut and the provisioning state, as it was called during the war. This connection with Cornay could easily be overlooked here in Connecticut among such other well-known figures like Rochambeau, Lafayette, and Admiral d'Estaing. Yet in the village of Cornay, the connection to our state and the revolution is well remembered. While in France in 2019, with students who were studying our World War I connections to the region, we visited Cornay. and the mayor, Denis Bluet, informed us of Corneille's role, a connection none of us had ever learned of, and encouraged us to explore it and our connection to his town more closely. So that is what we have begun to do. We have, with the assistance of the National Park Service and the W3R, begun a digitization project to make available the Governor Trumbull papers, which include a great deal of correspondence between our French comrades and local leaders and citizens. We've also embarked on a history project that will map the route using History Pin, create a visual archive of the places along the route the Army marched to and from Yorktown. Our largest and most ambitious project will be the continuation of Digging into History, the Rochambeau edition, next summer. We'll be hosting 15 French students and their chaperones from the area around Seicheprey and Corneille, and 15 Connecticut students to explore the landscape as Rochambeau and the Connecticut militias saw it. Students, both French and American, will research the life of a soldier from his or her town to help build knowledge about the men who fought and to help them better understand what that soldier may have experienced. Students will then spend 2 weeks side by side working in an archaeological excavation of a site associated with Rochambeau's army. And we'll have the opportunity to explore the ways in which the Franco-Connecticut relationship was born and has been sustained for over 250 years. Our goal is to introduce our residents to the Comte de Rochambeau in a way that they can see how his and his army's role in the American Revolution has relevance in our lives today, to show how this long relationship has contributed to our state in the past and how it can help us grow in the future. We hope the first Company Governor's Foot Guard, the other Connecticut militias, and our friends at the Old State House and the citizens of Connecticut will join us in remembering and celebrating these bonds of friendship, forged in battle for nearly 250 years with our dearest friends from across the pond. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergeant Major Raymond Height of the 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard. The officers and enlisted of the command bid you all hearty welcome as we gather here today to commemorate the meetings of General George Washington and the Count de Rochambeau on September 20th, 1780, and again in May 1781. Today we also recognize the 251st anniversary of the 1st Company, your state's oldest, continuously serving organized militia unit. The Count de Rochambeau was sent by King Louis XVI to aid the colonies in their fight for independence. The French not only sent over 5,000 troops and 2 fleets, but also the urgently needed arms and equipment for the battered Continental Army encamped in New York. The 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard was here on this spot on both those occasions to welcome Rochambeau and Washington and to provide the escort, security, while those 2 leaders planned the campaign that would ultimately lead to an American victory. Just 5 months after the 1781 meeting would find the British forces trapped on the Yorktown Peninsula between American and French armies, cut off from the sea by the combined French fleet, forcing the British commander, Lord Cornwallis, to surrender his forces, effectively ending the War of Independence. Each year, the 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard comes here to remember our French allies who came to these shores in our time of desperate need, and to recognize the part our command played at that time. From 1771, ensuring the safety of the Governor and the General Assembly, to 2020, activated during the COVID crisis to fulfill our humanitarian mission for the Department of Public Health. The 1st Company has stood ready to answer the call and strive to be an honor to the state. The 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard is indeed proud of our continuous 250 years of service to the citizens of Connecticut in war, peace, and pandemic. So we place this wreath on the stone of remembrance to mark this day and this place in our ongoing history. The rifle company will now fire a musket volley, a traditional feu de joie. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony here. You are welcome to...